Hey, what's up guys? Mendel here. Hope you are all doing wonderful and awesome. So in our first video we recorded vocals, then we edited them, then we mixed the screaming vocals, and now we get to the final video. We're gonna mix clean metal vocals. So as always, let's dig right in. Alright, so here we are in Cubase. So in a previous video we already mixed the screaming vocals. So I said before, in this video we're gonna mix the clean vocals. But before we're gonna do that, let's just listen to the whole thing. But just so you know, the clean vocals are fully unmixed. Here we go. Alright, sounds pretty heavy. I'm really happy with that. So before I'm gonna mix the clean vocals, as I said in my previous video, so I'm a big fan of like mid 90s, late 90s, early 2000 pop. Like pop in general, to be honest, even modern pop. I really like those bright, punchy vocals, like in your face, nicely compressed. And the cool thing is, as I also said before, so Daniel used a tube mic, which is like really bright, and I love that sound, especially for clean vocals. So I'm going to try to incorporate that bright popness in this metal mix, which can be tricky because overall pop mixes tend to be a bit more brighter than metal mixes, because metal mixes, probably the brightest things I think is like hi-hats and like cymbals and that kind of stuff. And with pop music, you have these synths which like has a nice coating of the whole spectrum. So it could be a tiny bit difficult, but I'm gonna try to incorporate that bright popness into a metal mix, which is how I mix, which is how I like it. Before we go mixing, let's go into some routing stuff. So these are the main cleans going into a vocal group. And the vocal group is going into the vocals clean master, which is going to the vocals master. So the vocals master has both the clean vocals and the screaming vocals. So this is going to that group, then these vocals are going to the second group, which is also going to the clean master. The reason I like a lot of groups is it gives me control. That's it. So before filming, I noticed an annoying frequency on all vocal channels. So what I'll do is, instead of EQing on the group, I'm going to do the EQing on every single channel. And to save time, a cool thing you can do, as you probably know, if I select all these channels, and when we go to the mix console, in the pro version of Cubase, you have link selected tracks, which is amazing. So I'm linking the EQ section and inserts, and I'm just going to call this clean vox link. Just like that. So now all of these tracks are linked. So when I go to one of the EQ sections, let's say I'm doing this one up, you can see over here that all of these are linked. So I'm gonna find that frequency, so I'm just gonna play through it. That's the thing I'm hearing, that whistle frequency. So when I back that down, you can still hear it through the mix. So let's cut that a tiny bit on all the channels.
It is time for revisions that are different society, desegregation, integrity, the release our souls from damnation.
Now that already sounds better. Now I'm gonna do some filtering, just like I did with the low or with the screaming vocals. I think I'm gonna filter off everything below 100 hertz because he sings pretty high and there's not like a really low note. So everything below 100 hertz. So this area.
It is time for revisions that are different society,
I'm not gonna need that in my mix, so I'll just cut it off.
desegregation, integrity, the release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified, step to salvation. It is time for revision.
Alright, sounding good. So I'm still hearing some whistle frequencies that I want to check out.
Time for revisions that are different society, desegregation, integrity.
And now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna bypass the EQ, so when it's yellow it's bypassed, to check that I make the vocals better or worse. And with vocals, I try to solo as less as possible because I really have to fit the vocals in the mix, but sometimes also fit the mix around the vocals, so adjusting the guitar mid-range and stuff like that.
It is time for revisions that are different society, desegregation, integrity, the release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified, step to salvation. It is time for.
So that sounds better to me. I am gonna solo for a short while to check out something on the lower mids.
For revisions that are different society, desegregation, integrity will release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified, step to salvation.
I'm gonna keep it like that. I like that mid cut because it was kind of honky around the mids. But let's take a listen.
It is time for revisions that are different society, desegregation, integrity, the release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified, step to salvation.
Now the vocals are perhaps a tiny bit too bright, but to be honest, I like that. I like how that sounds. And I think I will control a tiny bit of that with the de-essing. So also, by the way, this green filtering thing, so filtering off at the pre-section, that will also influence the compressor in a good way. So the low-end rumble won't affect the compressor that much. So as with the screaming vocals, I really like the vintage compressor. And again, everything is linked. So when I put up like a plugin on here, it also affects all the other channels. So while I'll like change the parameters on the compressor, I can instantly hear that effect on all vocals simultaneously. So most of the time with clean vocals, I like to do the attack around and take this with a grain of salt, please. But around 10 and a pretty early release and ratio around 4.
It is time for revisions that are different society, desegregation, integrity will release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. It is time for revisions that are different society.
And to be honest, I like to compress my vocals pretty heavily. I like that really in your face.
Desegregation, integrity will release our souls from.
So let's bypass it. So when it's yellow, it's bypassed. When it's gray, it's on. So I'll do that a couple of times back and forth.
It is time for revisions that are different society, desegregation, integrity will release.
I especially think that integrity, that part, like without compression, sounds worse.
Integrity will integrity will integrity will release our souls from damnation.
Now because of the gain reduction, I do have to like add some makeup gain for it.
Desegregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be pure. It is time for revision. Set our differences aside. Disaggregate our differences aside. Disaggregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified.
That sounds cool by me. Sometimes I like to use 2 compressors, but for now I think I'm gonna use 1 compressor and then on each bus do like another compressor, perhaps a tube compressor, just for some evening out. So we did some EQing and we did some compression. Now we're gonna do some de-essing. I like to use 2 de-essers, so one around the lower area, like around 2 kilohertz and 3, and one around your higher area, and especially on this tube mic, which is really bright, to keep those S's in check. So let's take a listen.
It is time for revision. Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. Integrity will reign. It is time for revision. Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us.
And a cool thing you could do, by the way, and I already showed this in the previous video, but just because it's such a great tool, so when you use frequency, you can see like where the peaks are.
Vision, set our differences aside. Disaggregation.
So peak around 2 kilohertz.
Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation.
All right, so then we're gonna add another de-esser. And this one we're gonna use for the higher area.
It's time for revision. Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation. It is time for revision. Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. Integrity. It is time for revision. Set our differences aside.
So let's bypass the de-essers and check before and after.
Disaggregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to self.
So I'm gonna do the higher one a tiny bit less because I want to keep that brightness.
Salvation. It is time for revision.
Let's check it in the mix.
Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation.
And to be honest, for some people this might be too bright, but I like this. I like the vibe I'm getting. I'm getting excited about these vocals. So what I'll do now, I'll do some tiny bit of compression and perhaps a tiny bit of EQ on the groups. So I'll first do this one and I'll loop it.
It is time for revision. Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. It is time for revision.
So that frequency is still kind of annoying to me, so I'm gonna down this tiny bit, but use the dynamic EQ of frequency.
Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. It is time for revision.
And be very careful with cutting vocals because you can, when you do too much, you can definitely suck the life out of it.
Revision. Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. It is time for revision. Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. It is time for.
So I heard some like low mid honk around here.
For revision. Set our differences.
But careful cutting that because you can really make the vocal sound too thin.
Aside. Disaggregation. It is time for revision. Set our differences aside. Disaggregation. It is time for revision.
So also using the dynamic EQ section around there.
Revision. desegregation. It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation.
So I like how it sounds. Let's check it in the mix.
It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation. It is.
I like how it sounds, so I'm gonna copy this to the other group channel.
It's time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be.
Cool, I really like where this is going. So I'm gonna do like a gentle touch of compression, and I really like the tube compressor. This one, just for some gentle bus compression. I'll do this again.
It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation. It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation. It is time for revision.
So I really like what that character knob is doing. It's making them really bright, but I'm listening solo, so I'm not listening to it in context. So just for fun, I'm gonna turn the character knob in context of the mix.
It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation.
Around 12% sounds good to me. So I'm gonna be gentle with the drive knob as well. I like that, but I have a cool kind of tube thing going on in the effects section we'll show in a bit. So I'm gonna copy these settings to the other bus. And I still hear a tiny frequency because the buildup on all of these channels. So I'm going to the Vocals Cleans master and just look for the frequency I'm hearing.
It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation. Integrity
3 kilohertz, 2.8.
will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation.
Yeah, I really like where this is going. So let's add some effects. So as you can see here, these are the effects channels. So what we have a parallel compression, which I also use on the screams, the Vox Verb. Basically all of this is like, I like to keep it simple. I like to use like a couple of delays, perhaps one reverb for all vocals in the whole mix, so it won't get too muddy and cluttered. But there's one thing that's only on the clean vocals, that's the tube. So one cool thing with what I like to do is add some saturation to clean vocals. So I have the clean, the tube here. So this is the tube. I think this is one of the oldest plugins in Cubase, and I've been using it for years. I love it. So what I did is I now have the clean the tube, like routed my groups to the tube, and the tube is going back into the vocal cleans master. I'll show you what it sounds like. So this is without it.
It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation.
So hopefully you can hear it add some saturation. So when I put the main clean master down a bit and then add this one in,
It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation.
it adds some grit, and I love that.
It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be.
Like it almost sounds that it's compressed the vocals more. All right, so let's add the other effects. So I'm not going to use the parallel compression on the cleans now. I am going to add some reverb,
It is time for revision.
which is the same as the screams, the surround vocal plate from Roomworks. Awesome.
Set our difference aside. Desegregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from.
Sounds cool. And then I'll add some delay, which is the stereo delay. Same as the screaming.
It is time for revision. Set our difference aside. Desegregation.
Adding the mono delay.
Let us be purified. Step to salvation. It is time for revision.
Sounds cool. And just so you can hear how awesome the Vox widener is, which I love in my opinion. So the Vox widener is just a stereo delay, same thing as the screaming vocals that I use, but it's like a very, very short delay. So watch or listen what happens. So I only have these two on.
It is time for revenge.
I'll turn off the delay and the other effects so you can really just only hear that widening effect.
It is time for revenge and set our differences.
You hear that?
Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified.
And just like to use a little bit on the cleans. So add it with the other effects. This is what we have.
It is time for revenge and set our differences aside. Desegregation, integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation.
So when I turn all the effects off,
It is time for revenge and set our differences aside. Desegregation.
that's a nice depth. So let's check it in the mix.
It is time for revenge and set our differences aside. Desegregation. Integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation. Set aside all things. Yeah.
And just to do like a final touch, I'm gonna use the frequency dynamic section just to keep the tiniest brightness in check. So I'm gonna use around, let's say like 3 decibel of the dynamic EQ.
It is time for revenge and set our differences aside. Desegregation, integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation. Set aside all that. It is time for revenge and set our differences aside. Desegregation, integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation.
So yeah, I'm really happy how these vocals are sounding. So 2 things before we round up this video. Let's do a quick like before and after comparison, and then to round up this video, let's do like a full playdown of the full vocals mix, both the streams and the cleans.
Will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation. It is time for revenge and set our differences aside. Desegregation, integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation. It is time for revenge and set our differences aside. Desegregation, integrity will revive. Release our souls from damnation. Let us be purified. Step to salvation. Set aside all things. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna turn down the reverb a tiny bit before I do the full playdown because I still think it's a tiny bit too much reverb. Alright, and that's it. So let's take a listen to the full thing.
It
right, and there you go. So those are some very basics for mixing clean vocals. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. And until then, see you next time. Cheers.
It is time for